Before we get too far along here, let me just say that yes, there are plenty of different sources that influenced Undertale, and I can appreciate their impact. You got Cave Story, Paper Mario, your Tahoo shooters, your whatever. They're there. They're a thing, and I get it, even if I can't pronounce them. Please don't think I'm ignoring these games or I'm otherwise unappreciative of them. But for the sake of clarity, I'll be giving a rather focused history of JRPGs, looking not so much at all divergent paths of development in the genre, but more what you might call a single evolutionary trail. Sound good? Beautiful. Knew I could count on you. Let's talk about history. Let's talk about the 90s.
Top clear. Suddenly everything is clear. For a new cartoon show.
Why'd you force that mint on me? I told you I didn't want the mint!
Yeah, the 90s were the best. We had great games, we had bowling alleys, and the green ketchup, and the Rwandan genocide. Oh. Well, we had good games, anyway. The technology had just taken a massive step forward with the introduction of consoles like the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. And all this led to the success of the RPG in the West. You see, back in the 80s, the technology of gaming consoles didn't really lend themselves to an engaging RPG experience. American audiences were a little too action-oriented to support something as slow-paced and, let's face it, boring as a JRPG. But times have changed. With the jump from NES to SNES, the West's taste in games was starting to expand and include the RPG genre. Improvements in hardware led to not only better graphics and sound, but more flexibility with game mechanics.
8-bit not as good. 16-bit, double the bits, twice good.
Yeah, look at all these slick new algorithms. Yeah, it's measuring how many steps I've taken and dealing damage to enemies based on that. Kupo, baby. Let's see here. We got your Chrono Triggers, your Final Fantasies, your Super Mario RPGs, your that one. But, oh, wait a second. You know, mechanics have improved, and we can do a lot more with how we structure RPGs, and generally speaking, they're way more fun now, but, why do I not really give a shit about these characters? I mean, I guess I do, but, even with all this text and graphics and sound and everything, it still just feels like a video game. These RPGs, I get the same level of emotional impact from them as when I play through Dig Dug. Like, they aren't characters in a story so much as they are a means to an end. Or the end. They may have had great gameplay, and they may have been well written, but they never really connected the two. Like for me, even with Final Fantasy VI, a game which plenty of folks argue is one of the greatest video game stories of all time, it only kinda got me going. I mean, kick-ass game, innovative mechanics, but... whatever. It's just a video game. Just a bunch of numbers. Well, books are just a bunch of letters, after all. So what are we missing between these two? What can bridge this gap? You know, storytelling in games. Make them play nice. Something that demonstrates an awareness of its media and can properly blend all these different elements between the two of them. Something that... Earthbound. Sweet, wonderful Earthbound. Or Mother 2 in Japan. While a standalone title in America at the time of its release, in actuality it is the second part of a trilogy of games made by one Shigesato Itoi. So something you should know about Itoi before we continue. He's a beautiful man. I don't have time to properly describe his history or go through his CV or nothing, but the important thing to know is that his respect and celebrity status in Japan initially stemmed from his work as a copywriter. Back in 80s Japan, a copywriter was basically a kind of corporate poet, where a person would come up with pithy, clever, or sometimes subversive slogans that would capture an entire company's ethos, packaging it in an exciting or appealing manner. Itoi's biggest success with this came from a line of department store commercials featuring, of all people, Woody Allen. He's a postmodern genius, really. But for those of you who take zero meaning out of all of that, just try and imagine him as a kind of Japanese combination of Tim and Eric, Kurt Vonnegut, and Jesus Christ, and we should be on the same page. Basically, a figure in Japanese pop culture loved by all, comfortable moving through popular, academic, and even corporate spheres. And when Dragon Warrior came out back in 1986, he saw it, and he said to himself, golly, check out this emerging art form of interactive media. While still quite crude, it offers the chance to blend a verbal narrative with audio and visual aesthetics in a reactive and engaging environment. Shit, son, I best be getting on this action to further contribute to the craft of storytelling and fulfill my godlike destiny. Word to the motherland, home slice. And that's the kind of background that Earthbound came from. Whether you love it or hate it, you have to admit there's nothing else out there quite like it. Now, if you're even remotely familiar with the series, then you're quite welcome to sing along to the refrain of cliched descriptions that seem to dog most reviews of the game. It's a quirky RPG that's set in the 90s. Baseball bats and frying pans replace swords and shields. It's a video game that lets you take food out of garbage cans. The last boss is an aborted fetus. So yeah, alright, it's a quirky game, and yeah, alright, sometimes it leans a little hard into the anime power of friendship trope. But if you're only seeing Earthbound as some kind of bizarre, idiosyncratic fragment of Japanese culture, then you're not looking deep enough. People don't become stupidly obsessed with this clunky relic of turn-based combat because it's quirky. They obsess over it because it's effectively quirky. Or, more to the point, it's effective. Super effective. Let me explain. How many 90s RPGs do you know that can characterize their protagonist through status ailments? You are homesick. You're miles and miles away from your friends and family. The creatures and people around you are only getting more and more hostile. You don't know where you're going, and damn it, you miss your mom. And you're not just told you're homesick, it's translated into the game. You can't attack. Your mind is elsewhere. You're wandering toward your desire for a home-cooked meal and familiar faces. You want to give it your all, but it's just not working. You're homesick. Let's try another in a similar vein. How many 90s RPGs manage to characterize their monsters or bosses by their own battle actions? As I mentioned earlier, the combat mechanics of SNES RPGs were vastly superior to those on the NES. But while the numbers and stats behind these games' programs may have gotten more intricate, the character depth found within their combat was still woefully one-dimensional. It's the same problem we've had with RPG stories in general. We don't care. It's all irrelevant to our interest in the game. Kill this, defeat that, save this, buy that. What's this, a slime thing? Now it's dead. Bada boom, beat the game, and so on. Case in point, who in the hell is Punchinello? Earthbound kept its head in the game, and it focused on the narrative elements of its battles. It let the text handle the brunt of its combat feel, and since Earthbound is generally speaking a text-based game, it ends up breaking down barriers between the game's story and its interactive elements. One more example. How many 90s RPGs deconstruct the genre in a way that isn't just comical, but actually meaningful? Like, look at the pencil statue. You're trekking through a new, dangerous portion of the game, trying to find a young girl kidnapped by an insane cult, when all of a sudden, blocking your path is a giant metal pencil. Could you even dream of expecting something like this? A giant metal pencil? Are you kidding me? And you can only get around it by using a device called the pencil eraser. Like, it's so stupid, it's so ridiculous, and yet it's so brilliant. One of the biggest problems in adventure and story games is how contrived some of the plot devices and obstacles are. Asinine reasons that keep players going in the game's preset path. Earthbound is all too happy to satirize this problem, and it maintains this postmodern sensibility throughout the game, right up to its final boss fight where the player actually, it's just... With a little violence and some more menacing weapons and creatures, this would have been an excellent RPG. Sadly, all Earthbound has to offer is a Barney-ass romp at a McDonald's. Shut up! This game is mind-blowingly brilliant. Nobody's got this shit. It articulates a breadth and depth of themes and ideas in 3 megabytes that few modern games can match. It maintains an unflinching control over its atmosphere and tone, it's inventive both in its literary and game-based storytelling, and it knows exactly what it's doing. Each way only continue this trend as you move forward with Mother 3. So don't try and tell me that the Mother series is boring. It's not boring. You're boring. Or, you know, maybe it's just not your thing. And, you know, that's okay. It's fine. We're all entitled to our own opinion. So you're probably saying to yourself, John, I just listened to you talk about Earthbound for 10 goddamn minutes. I feel like I've been stuck on a bus with you. How does this possibly relate to Undertale? The Mother series has influenced the pants off of Undertale. The pants! Really, even if this review is the first you've heard in the Mother series, I'm sure you couldn't help but see at least a few parallels between the games, just based on what I've already said. In fact, all 3 of the points I just made about Earthbound apply equally well to Undertale. But for those of you who are still skeptical of the extent to which the one has influenced the other, please direct your attention to the following informative strobe effect. Video. Warning. Viewers who suffer from epilepsy or are sensitive to intense displays of light and sound should consult their doctor before viewing. or may experience such symptoms as getting dunked on, The Mother series just influenced a little more than the pants off of me. I feel like I could actually taste the montage for a little while there. I was going to elaborate further on Undertale's connection to the Mother series, but I think I'm just going to save that for part 4. I need a breather. You may have noticed that I haven't really talked much about Undertale's creator, Toby Fox. Frankly, I get the impression from his Twitter posts that he's desperately clinging to what little sense of anonymity that he still has. So I figured I wouldn't let the review get too personal. Not that I feel all that sorry for the guy, getting all that praise and respect he deserves. I mean, if you want anonymity, then don't draw attention to yourself with kick-ass games. Really, the only thing I wanted to bring up about him is his Earthbound modding, a part of his history which, humorously enough, is one of the few things he explicitly stated he wants people to forget about. Oops. I'm not quite sure why he wants to distance himself from them, really. Arn's Winter Quest was really cute and fun and inventive, and his Halloween hack is also a thing. Unless you're already the kind of guy or gal who enjoys the weirdly personal experience of playing a stranger's ROM hack, you'll probably have trouble getting much out of it. Toby himself described the process as a huge amount of effort and no reward. I've actually done some Earthbound hacking myself, which is where I first got to know and even talk with Toby. I've got my own description of Earthbound hacking. It blows. It was, and to a lesser extent still is, a tedious, exhausting, thankless task, with the game's code actively trying to keep you from messing with it. See, unlike most games, which lay out their coding with a modicum of organization and sanity, Earthbound's own coding is freaking everywhere. You're in a foreign, hostile territory. The game does not like to be hacked. Switch one too many times between modifying dialogue and editing the map, and bam! Next thing you know, the entire game map is made up at the same corner of your mom's house, and all the game's sprites are replaced with a bus. Even with all the programs made by the lovely people over at Starman.net, modding Earthbound was an uphill battle. But with all that said, I have to disagree with Toby that his modding was a waste of time. Because from my own experience, modding Earthbound wasn't just a matter of being patient or hard-working. The fact is, if you wanted to make an even remotely worthwhile ROM hack, you had to be crafty. You had to be tricky. All the limitations and pre-made structures inherent in a game don't stifle creativity, but encourage it. Instead of having to ask yourself, what can I do? The question becomes, what can I get away with? And this mindset of what can I get away with dominates so many of Undertale's design choices that it's ridiculous. Just look at how the game handles saves. It isn't just a way to keep track of players' progress, it's a friggin' plot point. He recontextualizes the very idea of saving into the game's universe, furthering your sense of influence in the game's story, as well as turning it into an actual combat mechanic in the fight against Flowey. He even makes it look like an emulator save states, implying that you are the last boss in Flowey's ROM hack, reversing the player and game's roles by spamming save states the same way that anybody who's ever emulated a game has done. And look at all the little secrets Toby's thrown into the game's actual code. You can change certain values in the game's physical files to get even more exposition about the game's world, learning about a mysterious character named W.D. Gaster. It isn't a vital part of the Undertale experience, but Christ, who else does this kind of meta-narrative shenanigans in a video game? It's easy enough to see all of this as just a fun way to break the fourth wall, a way to poke fun at the conventions of gaming and conspiracy nuts. But there comes a point where being self-aware is no longer about easy laughs or being cool, and becomes a legitimate attempt at challenging and experimenting with what an art form can do. Video games are a relatively new medium. They've been around for about a fourth as long as cinema, and about a 100th as long as recorded literature. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a young means of creative expression. So young, in fact, that there are a fair number of people within the world of artistic criticism who do not even recognize it as a means of creative expression. Freaking Ebert. But all that's changing. Games are beginning to receive the respect they deserve as a medium. And it's games like Undertale that we can thank for this progress. Yes, we can enjoy its quirky charm, its writing, its music, its little secrets, but taken separately, these qualities aren't what make Undertale so special. It's the way in which it combines all of these elements, making the whole greater than the sum of the parts, fusing them all together to make a single game experience. Postmodern RPG that handles all of its mechanics and aesthetics to create a meaningful and unique storytelling experience, critical of the conventions of its medium, and consequently expanding upon them. You know what that sounds like? God damn it, I mean Earthbound. And like I said before, I'm not trying to attribute everything done right with Undertale to a single game series, and it's very clearly its own game. But if you take a close enough look, setting aside the superficial similarities between the games, you can find what I'd call a shared design ideology. That is, both Shigesato Itoi and Toby Fox have an underlying desire to innovate the merging of mechanics and narrative experience in video games, and the links between the two creators don't end there. They both approach their work not necessarily as programmers, but instead as storytellers, looking to find new ways of connecting their audience with the worlds they create. They're auteurs through and through, giving their games an undeniable style that reflects an earnest, personal vision. Undertale is most definitely a spiritual successor to the Mother series, and it doesn't need cute flavor text or idiosyncratic dialogue to earn this reputation. At the end of the day, there's only one connection between the games that really matters. They place before their audience a narrative and a set of rules, a structure. They give us the freedom to interact with and react to the structure, which in turn allows for a singular storytelling experience. It's art, bitch. And if I can set aside my own Mother fanboy tendencies for a brief moment, I can readily acknowledge the fact that there are other games out there that are looking to make the same kinds of innovation. Spec Ops The Line, Bioshock, Stanley Parable, the Fallout series, Cave Story. Hell, Undertale got its friggin' name from Cave Story. Oh yeah, I never noticed that before. It's pretty cool. As games mature as an art form, we can begin to really critically consider the impact and value of interactivity with storytelling. We've all seen so many videos along the lines of 101 things you didn't know about this game, or is such and such really what they seem to be, or any number of other surface-level appraisals or irrelevant fan theories. And I'd like to think that as a community, we can enjoy and appreciate video games at the same level of depth as we do with books or movies. But you know, maybe everything we've talked about here is bunk. Maybe we're just finding things that aren't really there, seeing the Virgin Mary in our grilled cheese. Perhaps we're looking into Undertale just a little too much. But maybe not. What do you think?